Welcome to r/Malicious Compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: management didn't move us to an early shift, so we stopped doing extra work and our productivity dropped. The second story: my wife was the victim of racist speech. She went to the authorities and heads rolled. The third story: Karen bullied kids. Didn't listen to rules, so when she told me stop the ride, I left her on top, then made it go full speed, making her cry. Today's first story is: don't want to move us to an earlier shift? Fine, have it your way. I used to work at a major grocer. They more or less supplied all restaurants, hotels, schools, kitchens, etc. in my country. Since all didn't need their food at the same time, they scheduled workers for different times. Usually the bulk of food would be driven out the afternoon before it was needed, and deliveries could not take more than 8 hours tops. They also promised their customers to fix problems with their orders, say if a picker had missed an item, or taken the wrong one, or if a carton got destroyed while delivering, etc. All this amounted to a very rigid structure, where management required top quality. We had detailed reports on everything, and if we were below efficiency, we got serious talks with management. Because the job was easy, they could handle large turnover because training to 100% speed took no more than a month or 2. This pushed long-time workers to be excellent all the time, and most people that had been there a year or 2 picked their orders with 100% or close to accuracy, and also were above the set efficiency margins with a good amount. We actually got nothing back from management from working more efficient. No increased salaries or bonuses for being above our weekly goals. Keep this in mind for later, as it is important. To handle customers' various demands, we had 2 morning shifts, 6:15, 7:16, a day shift, 9:30 to 1800, and evening, 15:30 to 2200. We also didn't assemble orders on Sundays if there were no leftover orders that couldn't be finished during Saturday. Generally, day shifters had the worst salary, since it was precisely in the unflexible time margins. In my country, you're paid more for worked hours between 22 and 8. There were large disparities between the shifts. Almost all new employees began working on the day shift, hence it became known as the chaos shift. The more seasoned workers began hating this shift, since they had poor handling of picking trucks and were slow in the narrow alleyways. Newbies obviously couldn't do much about this, and it wasn't their fault. Adding to that was that earlier shifts got priority at getting home earlier, if the company as a whole were ahead of orders. Now to the malicious compliance. The earliest shift, 6 to 15, had to pick for a major fast food chain each morning. This was heavy work. A box of fries weighed 15 kilograms, and an order typically had 30 boxes. It wasn't unusual that you'd pick a total weight of 7,000 kilograms or more during a whole shift. If they finished early, they usually got to go home for the day. Hence, it was sought after to work there, and many of us day shifters applied to switch shifts. The line to switch got longer and longer, and during my 3 years of working there, few actually got to switch. Before the incident, since the only reason the company had to switch an employee was if one working the other shift quit. During summer months, the ordinary early shifters went on their vacation, and in July and August, the more seasoned of us day shifters got to switch shifts to fulfill the fast food chain's orders. Management could not force us to do this, but we did it voluntarily, and they could do our weekly schedule however they liked. Typically, it got really bad with early mornings and later evenings intertwined. It was against labor laws to schedule us like that, but we didn't say anything to our union since we wanted the earlier shifts. It was amazing to finish early. I had time to hit the gym, go to the beach in the afternoon, and have a beer with friends before I got to bed. After working those hours, I really wanted to switch, but management was extremely stringent. It worked for them. They could keep the large bulk-off people on the less expensive day shift and ask them for help when needed. They didn't have to switch anyone, but I had an idea. I talked with all the people that usually switch shifts and convinced them that if no one switched, they'd have to move people to the earlier shifts since they did not have people enough to do the required tasks. I also talked with all the seasoned workers to stop doing extra work. For my plan to succeed, I needed everyone to do minimal work and no one to switch. It was glorious. Efficiency numbers plummeted. For 4 whole weeks, management had to ask people to come in on Sundays to work whole 8 shifts, which was 300% salary due to it being weekend and overtime. I heard from friends that worked in commerce that customers were furious that orders weren't fulfilled. Management ripped their hair out since we all did minimal but fully accepted amount of work, and hence they couldn't fire anyone. What did this all lead to? They switched half the day shift to the earlier shift, which included all the people that used to flex out of the day shift. They had to hire 5 more people, and they gave the evening shift an extra hour, until 2300, which was huge for them. Moral of the story: unionize and F middle management. The next story is, we didn't break any laws, sure, go to the authorities. This story took place in the mid-90s. My wife and I were newly married, and our daughter was still an infant. My wife worked in healthcare as a home care nurse, traveling from house to house looking after people. However, after our daughter was born, she did not want a job that put her on the road, so much in shifts in the evening. So she applied to be a cleaner at the military base near our community. 2 things about our situation that are noteworthy. One is that my wife is a visible minority, and second, as a healthcare worker, she logs everything as a force of habit. The company that hired her was a national company. The base office usually had 5 employees. One had recently quit because her husband was moving with his military job to another part of the country. So the local boss hired my wife to replace her. The 4 other workers were tight. Louise was the boss, who hired her best friend Donna, Donna's brother Dan, and Louise's niece Tracy. My wife was a true outsider. She immediately saw things were not quite on the level. Even though my wife was paid from 4 p.m. to midnight, she was home by 8 p.m. every night. She was also excluded from cleaning the buildings that housed the engineering and tenancy offices. Occasionally, when she would clean those offices, she saw her colleagues rifling through desks and filing cabinets, photocopying documents and other shady stuff. For clarification, the building where the desks were rifled was the offices where the base housing workers had their desks. They were looking for files and paperwork on maintenance contracts, schedules for inspections, anything worthy of gossip. It was not a case of national secrets. My wife also saw Louise threaten a soldier with extra duties for not opening doors fast enough. Louise's husband was a senior NCO in the unit, but jobs were hard to find at the time, so my wife was willing to accept a little discomfort to her ethics. However, after a few months, the racial epithets started. It started with a nickname, then morphed into slurs, and then rumors about her. They started telling racial jokes without trying to hide it. When my wife complained to the 4 of them that she was uncomfortable, she got called weak, and they threatened her employment. My wife told them that she would go to the head office. So, she called the head office from work. Stuart, from HR, dressed down my wife over women's talk, and she needed to thicken her skin and not be too sensitive. My wife countered that she would go to the authorities. Stuart said no laws have been broken, so she should go to the authorities. Good luck. Later that shift, she was fired for attitude. So my wife went to the authorities, just not the police. She went to the Human Rights Commission and to the military base headquarters. She gave both photocopies of her logs. The human rights investigation determined that there was a work environment that tolerated racist behaviors. That garnered an apology and an acknowledgement from Stuart, with a smug comment that they will henceforth include a clause about racial sensitivity in their employee paperwork. He even made a comment to my wife that essentially this was nothing. However, behind the scenes, the base had been doing their own investigation. Some of the people whose desks had been rifled in the tenancy buildings had reported that they suspected they had been snooped through. The dates of some of their reports matched my wife's logs on the date she was there. Louise threatening a soldier was followed up, and it was discovered that Louise's husband had chastised the soldier and arranged for him to do 2 weeks extra duties, a violation of an abuse of authority statute. The contract with the base required 40 hours of service per day. The base pulled the security and key logs showing that work was always done by 8 p.m. The base was paying for 40 hours per day and getting 20 hours service. There was a clause in the cleaning contract that stated that federal government human rights regulations needed to be followed. The results of the commission's investigation determined that they were in violation. There are fundamental human rights, that is for certain, but the federal government has certain processes for assurance of these rights and resolution of conflict around these rights. These processes are in place for government agencies, including the military, and any industry regulated by federal law, like airlines, but are not mandatory for other agencies and private businesses. Where this cleaning company fell down was in the assurance of rights area. They had no established discrimination complaints process that my wife could go to when they started their racist activities. By the contract, they were to adhere to the government standards for this, but did not. This meant that they were in violation of their contract with the base. Other bases were contacted to see what was going on with this company, and they found out others were having similar issues. As a result, the base broke the contract with cause. It was a 5-year contract broken after the 2nd year. Louise, Donna, Dan, and Tracy were suddenly out of work. The next cleaning company came in. All personnel had to undergo vetting for security. All cleaning was done during the day, preventing people from rifling desks. 40 hours was 40 hours, and cleaners were not authorized to engage soldiers beyond casual "how are you" conversations. My wife went back to healthcare. However, every once in a while, she wonders what Stuart thinks of women's talk now. Edit to clarify a few points. The desk snooping was in the base housing offices. The 4 cleaners all lived in base housing, so they were looking up gossip-worthy material on their neighbors and friends, etc. They were also looking to see what major contracts were coming for house repairs, e.g. window replacement. It was not classified material. While the 4 of them lost employment, they were not held accountable. The company that had the contract just laid them off, so they were able to find work again shortly. However, just not as cleaners. Cleaners had a reliability screening to work on the base even prior to this. However, it is as simple as a criminal record check and not much more. After this, the cleaners never worked in an area without supervision, and always during the same workday as the people in the offices. The NCO who chastised the soldier was called to task for that. He ended up getting moved a year later, with a bit of a shadow following him. However, it did not last long, and there was no permanent career mark left. Finally, we were very young. My wife and I are, and were, not the type to rock the boat. I was brand new in the military and did not want to be labeled as a problem soldier. So we remained quiet for too long. After this, both of us grew our confidence and were able to move on. We don't stay quiet too long when something is not right. The last story is, Karen tells me to stop the ride, so I did, / the day I made Karen cry. I work in an amusement park, and we have this ride called Moby Dick. This ride is 100% controlled by the operator. A couple of weeks ago, this woman and her friend came up to my ride, making fun of one of the kids that were on the ride. She was saying so many hateful things about how they look. Without even looking at her, I told her to stop, and this is how it went. Me, you're literally talking about a 7-year-old like that. You need to stop, or you will not be allowed on the rides. Karen, but it's true. Look at them. Me, don't disrespect other guests, please. It's not okay. Karen's friend, stop, Karen, before you get us in trouble again. Karen, whatever. When the ride was finished, I start letting the next group of people in. I say, do not pull down on the bars. Pick any seats you'd like, to everyone as they walk in, since pulling on the bars can break the seats over time. I let a group of young boys in before Karen's group, and they sat at the end seats. Karen marches over to the kids yelling at them to get out of her seat, and the chief paid to sit at the end. Me, miss, please stop yelling at the kids or you will be removed from the ride with no refund and tickets. Karen, don't tell me. Karen's friend, stop it, Karen, just sit in the middle. She complained the whole time walking to the middle seats, and then pulled down the bar. I was thinking it was time to get a manager over, but I didn't want to bother them with her. Once I got everyone seated, I closed all the seat bars. When I was checking the seats, Karen's one was on the loose side, so I pushed it in a little to make it tighter. Karen, you're trying to kill me. First you left my seat open, now you're making it so I can't breathe. I ignore her and keep checking seats. When I finally start the ride, I slowly rock it, and Karen is screaming to take her off, so I make the ride go faster, doing full circles now. Halfway during the ride, Karen screams, stop the ride, you effing B. She wants me to stop it? Fine with me. I park the ride at the top of the ride like I do in closing, but keeping the ride on. The 6 others on the ride weren't scared the ride stopped. Karen started screaming, crying, and begging to be let down. The parents watching know what she said before their kids, and know what's going on and start laughing. After around 30 seconds, she's screaming, let me down still. So I do on the fastest setting. I start the ride spinning full speed. I made the ride a little longer, since all the kids were having fun. Before I open the seats, I scream a warning. Me, wait for the bars to be fully open, and stay above your head before getting up. Stay seated. Karen pushes it up and gets up, having the bar fall back down, and hit her in the head. Her friend laughs at her and gets up, walking her off the ride. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.